Welcome to Retirement Unlocked with Larry Heller. Your life, your way, unlimited possibilities. Join us as we explore how tailored financial planning and investments can help you navigate life transitions with confidence. Let's dive into this week's episode.
And welcome back to Retirement Unlocked with your host, Larry Heller. When most people think about life insurance, they think about what happens after they're gone. But what if life insurance could also protect you while you're still alive? During a serious injury, illness, unexpected health event? Well, today, Larry is joined by Rich Big Daddy Salgado, an insurance professional who has spent years working around professional athletes. In that world, careers can change overnight because of one injury or diagnosis, which forces athletes to think a little differently about risk and protection. In this episode, Larry is going to explore with Rich how the same mindset applies to everyday families and retirees, and why living benefits and life insurance are becoming an increasingly important part of financial planning, not as an upgrade, but as a standard. Larry, I'm looking forward to this conversation, and good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. Well, Rich, thanks so much for joining us today. I think our audience will find this beneficial for them. So, Rich, I know you've spent years working with and around professional athletes. So, want to kind of tell us how that experience shaped the way that you think about risk, protection, and planning?
Well, I was brought into this field by a gentleman he had the same idea and plan of doing what I currently do. And I think I shared with you when we first met that here I am, get all these licenses, become a professional. I studied more for all these financial exams, and I think I did it 4 years or 5 years in college. And all of a sudden, after I become licensed, he goes and quits and moves. So I tell the story about how I felt like I was in the middle of a MetLife Stadium on the 50-yard line with no one around me, like in an empty stadium, because I was like, whoa, deer in headlights. What's the next step? Well, I had a network that was in place. I just needed to attack that network with a plan. And the plan was that I was going to show people how to protect themselves both on and off the field. It wasn't the most important thing in these young athletes' lives because, they start playing football, 20, 21, 22, and they have the Tarzan mentality. Nothing's going to happen. And, I don't have to worry about all that. But that's done a whole 360 now since I first started in the business. People see the value behind insurance. Insurance, one side of our business is the career-ending disability insurance, where that starts with a kid in college because these guys are now realizing that they're going to be first-round, second-round picks, and God forbid they have to have some sort of protection. They go to sleep at night knowing that they have this protective umbrella, that's over them while they get to the next step.
Yeah, so I mean, some of those athletes, making millions, and with the NIL money, such a large amount of money that in college, but even the amount of money you're making now as a professional, it's just increased so high that one injury and you could be forfeiting a lot of money going forward. So before we kind of talk about, kind of the everyday person, like what's special about, do you do with the athletes and making sure that they're protected?
Well, it's twofold. Like I said, we have two sides of the business. We have the disability career ending side, and we also have the life insurance side with living benefits. And we'll discuss the first one first. And that is, God forbid something happens to you while you're playing, that you can no longer perform your sport. That doesn't mean that you have to be in your deathbed or you have to lose a limb or anything along those lines. It's just, if you're a football player and you can no longer play football, you will be compensated in a tax-free manner for the amount that you're insured for. Now let's flip over to the other side where we have the life insurance and we have the living benefits. Obviously, when you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, the last thing that anyone is thinking about is death.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we always say it's better to be safe than sorry. And the other thing is you have these guys that are making, like we just said before, NIL money.
Mm-hmm.
They are making more money than some guys that are in the NFL currently. And it's
Absolutely.
like when you see these numbers, because I do get to see them, and we've insured a few. I mean, it's astronomical. So the living benefits part is it actually goes a little bit more. It's like disability insurance, but what it does is, God forbid, you have cancer, heart attack, stroke, cognitive impairment, and you're insured for, let's say, $2 million, because it's not a lot of money for a 19, 20-year-old. If one of those things were to happen to you, we would be able to give you a check for, a pretty decent amount, over $1 million, and go and fix whatever your problem is. And I'm saying fix it because, something's broken. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, those are things that come up, but not usually when it's a young man. It's obviously a little bit, usually most of the time it's down the road. But my partner, Chris Muir, and I, we make it an important part of each client's, uh, so to speak, portfolio, because we want to make sure that, hey, look, if you can go on a date or you can go out with one of your buddies and spend $100, $125 at one sitting, you go to the gas station, by the time you fill up your tank, you get a sandwich, you get a drink, there you are, you're at $100. Why not do something like this, like the insurance, and spend $100 on that? Because it has more meaning than the gas and the food or the date. And, we get a chuckle from guys when you tell it to them that way, but, that's the best way to put it. We're not going to get wealthy off anybody. We just want to make sure that they have the knowledge and understanding of what we bring to the table and why we offer this and why it's important.
So let's kind of unpack a couple of that. So on the career-ending insurance, that is really a specialty. It's really not. You can't just go down to your local, insurance company and get career-ending insurance. So why don't you just talk about that for a second, and then we'll get
Sure.
back to the living benefits for a second.
Okay, so the career-ending insurance is obviously Lloyd's of London. They're they're the big daddy in that space, and I've been personally myself been dealing with them for over 25 years, and we've written some of the biggest names that you would see, and people's eyes would pop out of their heads. But those are the ones that were intelligent enough, or not that they're not intelligent, but they had the right people around them to suggest to do something. And yes, you have to be approved for it. Um, I've had battles where I've had to fight to try to get someone coverage because, I know that they're a potential high pick, but an underwriter who's over in London may not understand that. And you have to kind of then battle, do your research, and explain to them that, hey, this guy is legit. And I'm not saying give him 5 or 10 million, but give him something. And then again, it's insurance that pays these guys. It protects their future earnings. If a guy gets terminal, gets hurt, can't play, here's your payout.
Right. So he can blow a knee out, not be able to be able to play and live a full life. He just can't be a football player.
Yeah, there's guys that always say, "What am I going to do?" I'm like, if you got $1 million, $2 million, you could do whatever you want, but you could still go get a job, coach, be a CEO, do any of those things. You just can't play football.
Okay.
I've had, and I'll share a story.
Sure.
I did have a client that had an issue, and he was out of his sport, then decided to have about 15 operations, got approved to come back and play for a couple more years. And what he did was, since he had already received the compensation, he paid the compensation back to the
Wow.
insurance company. That's how bad he wanted to play.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's not kind of flip over. You started talking about the living benefit. So what you're really talking about is a life insurance policy, and that life insurance policy has those benefits like you were mentioning, cancer, heart attack, stroke. But just to be clear about that for our audience, wouldn't their health insurance cover all those type of diagnosis?
Not all the time. And the beauty of this thing is sometimes you have to go to different places to get things repaired or fixed. And what I mean by that is look at all the guys that were going for, and I'll relate, some football guys were going over to Europe to get stem cell treatment. That's not approved in the United States, nor is it covered by any health insurance plan. And they would go over there. Some guys I know, Costa Rica is a big stem cell place now. And guys bounce around all over the place trying to find ways to be ahead, stay healthy, fix things, correct things. And that's why a living benefit is
Hmm.
it's your money. So
Right.
basically, if you're insured for $2 million and I say, okay, Larry, here's $1 million. You need to go to Tijuana, whatever the place you need to go to, it's your money. You do what you want. You can come back to work and you don't have to pay that back. That's the beauty of it. It's
Hmm.
not like I would say like long-term care, for instance. A lot of people always try to compare the two. Well, long-term care is most of the times restricted on who you go see. You have to fall into some bracket or category that they have, and then it doesn't pay out. It doesn't pay to go and have it in some cases because it's not going to do what you need it to do for you. So that's the difference between, living benefits, health insurance, or what's the one we were just talking about? I forgot.
Long
Long-term
term.
care.
Right.
Long-term care.
But
Yeah.
this is
And
really, I mean,
disability. So
right. So, but this kind of is like a long term, like, well, like what types of situations trigger living benefits? Wouldn't that kind of also fall under some long term care?
no, because what happens is there's different categories that trigger each point.
Hmm.
Meaning, like if you have this sickness, if you have this, you get this amount. It's all broken down by the disease or sickness or ailment that you have. And then the company goes and determines how much, when the payout is, and so forth.
Right. But so, but wouldn't this also cover some type of chronic illness?
Yeah, it would cover chronic illness as well. Everything is based on the amount that you have that you're insured for, and then the illness that you're putting in a claim for.
So, right. So if you wouldn't, if you're not able to do a certain amount of the activities, so so this could actually also help when you're older. It's not just for when you're younger, it's when you're older as well, correct?
Yeah, we've had one client that obviously, and it's we're able to use the information that he puts out there that he had a policy, and 6 months later he had to collect on it. And this guy was a young guy who played sports, healthy as could be. All of a sudden, had a heart attack, and he had a $2 million policy. They gave him $1 million. 8 months later, he was back to work.
Hmm.
And he was a young guy. So, but as long as you have the coverage and the amount, you're going to get your payout to
Right.
whatever illness or ailment you have.
Right. So he took $1 million out. He would still be left with $1 million life
Yeah,
insurance on the
yeah, death
policy.
benefit. Yeah,
So he
yep,
still have a death benefit of 1 million. So
yep.
whatever you don't use is still.
Yeah,
uh,
it's like the regular policies. You see how people take out cash value loans and all that, and
Mhm.
then there's always a deduction later on at the end. And so basically, that's along those lines.
Right. So you're very kind of have a big belief on these living benefits. So, why do you believe that the living benefits should be, standard, not an optional upgrade?
Well, because a lot of people see, look, I have here, as you can see, I have a beautiful scar right here. Okay. And
Hmm.
that's from being a brain aneurysm survivor.
Oh, wow.
That a lot of people don't know that I went through that. But it's well documented. And when this happened, this was in 2008, I was working out, I was doing everything like no big deal. And
Hmm.
how we discovered it was I got in a wrestling match with a very famous football player, and
A play wrestling match or a real wrestling
I'll
match?
play in a pool, right?
Okay.
So in a play out in the Hamptons,
Okay.
and if he watches this, he'll laugh because he knows who he is.
Hmm.
And if I mention his name, the whole world would know. But so I get out of the pool and I can't hear. Like I'm like, man, my ears are clogged.
Hmm.
So I go to the doctor. No, I went to the pharmacy. I get one of those squeegee things, try to get it out. It doesn't work. Go to the doctor. My doctor doesn't says I don't see anything. After seeing two different specialists, one says you need to get an MRI. So I get an MRI of my ear, but when you get the ear, you get the whole head. Well, I get a call back and they say, hey, you need to come do an ARI.
Hmm.
Okay. I go get that done. And then the doctor says, oh, I need to speak to you. And he goes, you got a bigger issue than the water in your ears. And I said, what's that? He goes, you have this, look at that little ball right there. He goes, you know what that is? I said, I don't know. He goes, it's an aneurysm. It hasn't popped. We can fix it. We can, there's two ways of going about it. They can go through your groin and they can coil it, or they go through your head and they clip it. Well, we tried to do the leg thing, which I would have been a lot happier, but it didn't
Hmm.
work. So we had to go through the head, and God was on my side because I was out of the hospital in 7 days, but it took me a good 2 years to get back to normal. Even though, I'll tell you a funny story. After I had the surgery, it was during football season, so I was really bummed out that I missed the game and whatnot. And here I am. I should be worried about living, let alone
Hmm.
worrying about football. I went to the next Giants game, and I show up, and it was in Pittsburgh, of all places. So I got on a plane, flew to Pittsburgh, and when I got there, it was still, late September, so the weather was still nice and whatnot. And here's me wearing a ski hat. And people, so people are looking at me like, boy, that guy's like either roadie or gangster or whatever, because everybody's still out not wearing coats, even it's still September. And I remember uh, John Mara, the owner of the Giants, saying to me, what are you doing here? Like, are you okay? How do you feel? I put on a good act, but I
Hmm.
still was not ready. I should not have been there. I went, I saw the game, a great game, but I remember it took me the stadium to the hotel where I was staying, what normally should have taken 25 minutes, 20 minutes or so, took me over an hour because I didn't have the energy. Wasn't still back yet. But I made it back, and I remember I went to sleep at like 7 o'clock at night, and the next day I flew home. Um, but yeah, those are things like, and I share this all the time with people. You never know. No one is that special that something like this can't happen to them. So it's always best to be protective, be safe, and be sound of mind, knowing that, hey, God forbid something happens. I have something that I can fall back on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's some story. I mean, a clogged ear and to get that, but you're right. I mean, everyone thinks, especially when they're younger, they think they're, invisible, invincible, but that's not always the case.
I'll
So,
share, and not to cut you off, I'll
go
share
ahead.
something even funnier. So now I go through this whole exam and everything, and it's around my birthday in September. So I say to the doctor, I say, well, what's the next step? Am I like going into the hospital or, and he said, well, we'll get a bed and we'll set it up and, there's no urgency. So I say to him, well, if that's the case, look, my friends are throwing me a birthday party. Can I go to it? And they're like, the doctor's like, yeah, why couldn't you? Well, it's in Los Angeles. Is it okay for me to fly? And he goes, look, you'll be fine. Hopefully it doesn't pop on you while you're on the plane. I'm like, oh, that's real enthusiastic, but or
Well,
comforting. But I
right.
said I went, and the funny thing was we're at dinner, and without naming names, there was some pretty big who's who there. And there was a fight that broke, an argument that broke out over who was going to get what if I didn't make it through the surgery. Like, meaning, because I was a bachelor, I lived it by
Right.
myself, and I had a pretty good, asset base. So everybody was like, I want the car, I want the TVs, I want all this stuff. And I'm like, boy, I'm glad everybody wants me around. So that was it helped get through the whole ordeal because I thought about that a lot and I was
Right.
laughing and
Well, I'm glad everything worked out and you're here with us today. Finally, just let's talk about life insurance. What is the biggest misconception you hear about life insurance from either athletes or young families?
a lot of it is they don't have an understanding. I think that what we do at our firm is we educate people. Like, why do you have insurance? Why you need it? Maybe you have the wrong product. A lot of people like product A where they should really be in product B. And there's cost because the numbers change, actuarial numbers change, prices change. And a lot of people buy insurance and they buy it from their college roommate, their classmate, or if they meet somebody at church or temple or whatnot. And they buy it and they put it in the desk and they forget about it. Well, everyone's economics change, sometimes for the better than worse, or sometimes for the worse. Well, if you don't visit and you don't review, you have to keep up with the Joneses, meaning like
Mhm.
keep up with the trends. If there's a change in price or there's a better product. I remember one time we had a client that was in late 60s and they were paying X. We went and revisited and took out a whole new other policy, and it was less money because the underwriting was much better and they were healthy. And we're like, listen, if I give you this can of Coke and it costs $5, but I can give you another one for two, why wouldn't you take the two instead of the five if they're both Coke?
Hmm.
And I think the biggest thing again is the education process. Sitting down with people and explaining to them why it's important to have, and it's important to choose the right product, and it should be cost effective, and it shouldn't be where it's benefiting me. It has to benefit the client. That's why my partner and I always joke around. We're not going to get wealthy off of you. We're not here to get wealthy off of you. We're going to do the job. We're going to be consistent, just like we are with everybody else. And we're going to educate you. And the reason why the education process helps also because it leads to referrals. If you do a good enough job for one individual, they will be glad to refer you to somebody else. We
Okay.
don't hard sell anybody and we don't try to push it on anybody. We're here to help you.
Yep. So, Rich, this has been, a delightful conversation. Learned a little bit more about you personally. Thanks for sharing. And I think our audience has learned a lot about career ending insurance, living benefits. So, any closing thoughts that you may have?
You know, uh, I will say this that again, our firm is here to help people. And we even created a new website. It's called mytermlife.ai. And what we had with that whole thing, we allow people to go online and get their own quotes. You could look up stuff. You could learn about living benefits. You could learn about our team. And we will assist anyone that needs help with the insurance process. And even if they have insurance, the biggest thing is to let's review it. Maybe you're paying too much, or do you know it's coming to an end? Because when you buy term, you have 10, 20, 30 year. All these things come into play. And it's important that you have professionals that are willing to take the extra step to make sure that you have the right coverage, right protection, and you have a person that cares that works alongside you.
Great. Rich, Big Daddy, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a pleasure. Hope our audience learned something out there about different types of life insurance.
Well, thank you guys for having me. And if you ever need me again, please don't hesitate to ask. And Larry, I look forward to us working together. So we got to break bread again, and I'll get to take you to one of my spots, and then we'll go from there.
You got it.
That's great. Thanks for being on, Big Daddy. That was nice. It's good to demystify life insurance because a lot of people don't like talking about life insurance.
Oh, people run away. That's why I always tell them the first thing that happens when they see me in a suit, they think I'm somebody's security guy, and then you have to explain to them, no, I have a simple job. It's selling life insurance. You don't have to run away. I'm here to help, and that's it. If you have any questions, ask me, and I'll answer them.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And Larry, thank you for, having Rich on to help underscore the importance of life insurance and how it's changed too, as a matter of fact. Today's conversation highlights an important shift in how we think about life insurance. It's not just about protecting your family someday. It's about protecting your financial life when you might need it the most. Whether you're an athlete, a business owner, or planning for retirement, the reality is the same. Serious health events can create financial stress long before estate planning ever comes into play. Understanding living benefits can change how you think about risk, income protection, and long-term planning. Thanks again to Rich Big Daddy Salgado for joining us and sharing his perspective. Thank you for listening to Retirement Unlocked. And if today's episode helped you think differently about life insurance and protection, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could benefit. And if you want help reviewing how insurance planning and protection fit into your overall retirement strategy, check the episode description for resources and a link to schedule a complimentary 20-minute call. Until next time, thank you.